Construction. Thank you so much for that. Now we're going to get to our second conversation where we are joined by Dorothy Maseke, who is the head of Africa Natural Capital Alliance in FSD Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. So this week we've been talking about Africa Climate. It's Africa Climate Week,
yes.
And yesterday we concluded the Africa Climate Summit,
yes.
The 3-day event that was speaking about different issues that we need to do in order for us to improve our situation and also cushion ourselves as a country when it comes to our climate. All right. So first of all, what were your expectations of the summit, and were they met?
Yes, actually one of the greatest expectations, of course, was to see what the African Leaders Nairobi Declaration on Climate Change was about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had all been waiting to see what African heads of state have committed to and what they're proposing, which we expect, of course, will feed into proposals for COP28. And we are glad that we saw initially some drafts, and I think towards the end of the day, some of the final versions were shared. So looking at those proposals, personally I was quite excited, quite satisfied. I pretty much liked, the order of, the proposals and then the call to action,
mm-hmm.
which came out very critically and very clearly from the declaration.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And now, today, we've had complaints from different organizations saying that the expectations were not made and the proposals that were put forward or the declarations that were put forward might be the same things that we've been hearing all the time. So what would you say to this?
Again, it's not easy to, it's a complex topic. And we all have different expectations. So it's definitely not easy to, please everyone. But from my own perspective, for the first time, Africans and Africa came together in one voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the strongest proposition within that declaration. Having heads of state speaking in one voice, or committing to and agreeing on certain actions. And so in that context, the ability to rally together as a continent and make certain requests or demands, and more importantly, and I think that's the key aspect that for me really stood out, the ability to recognize Africa as a great continent that has beautiful resources, amazing resources that can actually be the solution for our own problems.
Mm-hmm.
So just the fact that we can use Africa's abundant resources, abundant capabilities to actually solve African challenges came very strongly for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. And now when you look at the commitments that were put forward, the different commitments by different nations going forward, are we looking at something to do with them making sure that at least they do whatever they committed, or it will still be hearsay? Okay, we say we are going to do this. So what are we looking at in terms of the commitments that were put forward?
If you look at the proposals, something that comes out very strongly is that, high emitters need to actually keep their word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that has been said for quite a long time, and now it's actually written down, and it's an expectation. Looking at some of the commitments, UAE, $4.5 billion, that's not a small sum of money, yes, for clean energy. Mm-hmm. Looking at the government of Germany, taking on a 65 million debt swap in exchange for green energy projects as a means of supporting the continent. Again, the same UAE, pledging to purchase 450 million worth of carbon credits within the continent, meaning there's market. So for us as a continent, we have great resources, including, being the Congo Basin, for example, being the world's largest carbon sink.
Mm-hmm.
And for the very first time, we have huge commitments, and we will be going into COP28 with, huge sums of money that have been pledged or that have been committed towards purchasing our great resources. And in this case, the ability to capture carbon.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, we are nearing the end.
Yes.
Now, let me ask this. When you look at the proposals and when you look at the declarations, how are they going to trickle down to the common Mwananchi at the end of the day? Because at the end of the day, it's the individuals. So from where you sit, what effect will this have?
One, Africa is highly dependent on agriculture, and if you look at the proposals that have been put forward, then the concept of ensuring that there's food security comes through as one of the end results. That goes directly into people's stomachs. That goes directly into livelihoods. One of the other commitments or calls to action was in terms of, there being an African biodiversity strategy and action plan. And in fact, it says that the agenda for that particular component is for us to live in harmony with nature. Nature plays a key component in sustaining livelihoods. And if we are able to restore, protect, preserve nature, then at the end of the day, then it means communities will be able to have food. They will be able to, the floods with time will be able to, things like drought will be able to be managed, because nature and climate go hand in hand. They're actually two sides of the same coin. So when you look at all those proposals, at the end of the day, what do we want? We want an Africa that is stable. We want an Africa that is food secure. We want an Africa that is healthy, because all these things, tie into health and well-being. We want an Africa that can sustain itself, but more importantly, an Africa that can strive towards equal and shared prosperity. For example, and you'll see in the proposals, the ability to, to actually have this, our vast minerals to be actually, made within the continent, or rather processed within the continent, processed in continent. So that we don't have to seek help from outside. So that we don't have to seek help from outside. And so that, the ability to grow economically then remains, and we become more sustainable and resilient as a continent.
Right, briefly, lastly, COP28. What are we looking at? And what are some of the things that you think we are going to take to COP28?
One, the push for international financial organizations, global, you'll see the declaration, global taxes, and reforms on international financial organizations to basically fund the climate agenda. I think that is big, because that is, if we're able to get that support, then it makes it much easier for many of these proposals to come through. So I think that is one of the key aspects that will be a key negotiation point at COP28.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. That is Dorothy Maseke, who is the head of African Natural Capital Alliance within FSD Africa, joining us to discuss about now, after the end of Africa Climate Summit that ended yesterday, what are we looking at in terms of what is going to be coming when it comes to COP